Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to reflect on a truth long buried under centuries of exploitation, misinformation, and strategic silence. A truth now echoing louder than ever through the powerful voice and bold actions of a man who refuses to bow. Captain Ibrahim Traoré. In an age where neo-colonial forces still cast long shadows across the African continent, Ibrahim Traoré stands as a beacon of resistance. The young Burkinabe leader has dared to say what many feared and others denied, that Africa has been trapped, not just by weapons or war, but by manipulation of the mind, by propaganda designed to condition an entire people to submission. He has exposed the sinister acts of the West, pulling back the curtain on decades of political interference, economic pillaging, and cultural distortion. Traore is not merely fighting terrorism, he is confronting a deeper, more insidious enemy, the carefully crafted illusion that Africa needs saving by the very powers that have weakened it. In exposing France's historical and ongoing role, Ibrahim Traoré has ignited a firestorm. He has shown how, under the guise of aid and diplomacy, France has maintained a grip over former colonies, embedding itself in education, media, and governance. These are not acts of partnership, they are instruments of control. He has highlighted how African youth have been taught to look outward for solutions, to speak a foreign tongue more fluently than their own, to celebrate foreign heroes while forgetting their own ancestors. This is not mere theory, the facts are visible. Rigged economic systems, unequal trade deals, military interventions masked as peacekeeping, and support for puppet regimes willing to sell out their nations for foreign favor. These are the fingerprints of exploitation, and Captain Traoré has made it clear, enough is enough. His voice is not just for Burkina Faso. It resonates across Mali, Niger, the Sahel, and beyond. It is a rallying cry for African dignity, self-reliance, and truth. Traoré is part of a new generation of African leaders who are not waiting for permission to speak. They are reclaiming Africa's story from the grip of those who wrote it with colonial ink. Yes, the West's power runs deep, but the will of a liberated people runs deeper. And when the truth is finally spoken, when the fog of brainwashing clears, something powerful happens. People wake up. Ibrahim Traoré has lit that spark. It is now up to all of us, Africans at home and in the diaspora, allies of justice around the world, to fan that flame into a movement that reclaims Africa's voice, Africa's resources, and Africa's future. There comes a time in the life of every nation and of every people when truth can no longer be buried beneath silence, when courage rises above fear and one voice dares to say what so many have whispered for too long. That voice today is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a leader who has refused to be bought, silenced, or intimidated. Ibrahim Traoré exposed Western neocolonialism in Africa. He has openly challenged the ongoing political and economic control exerted by Western powers, especially France, over African nations, calling out decades of exploitation disguised as cooperation. In doing so, Traoré has revealed not only the chains around our economies, but the more dangerous chains placed on our minds. For too long, African countries have been trapped in systems rigged against them. Under the mask of aid, democracy, and security, the West, led notably by France in West Africa, has entrenched itself in our institutions, our currencies, and our political systems. They position themselves as protectors, yet their presence has often brought more conflict than peace, more debt than development, more dependency than progress. Traoré has pulled back the curtain on this hypocrisy. He has pointed out how foreign troops and so-called peacekeepers have remained stationed on African soil not to protect the people, but to protect interests, foreign interests. He has made it clear that the fight against terrorism has become a convenient excuse to maintain military control over strategic areas rich in resources like gold, uranium, and oil. But perhaps the most insidious form of colonization Traore has exposed is not physical or economic, it is psychological. France, in particular, has used education systems, media, and culture to subtly but effectively reprogram African minds. From school books that glorify colonial exploits to news coverage that presents African resistance as chaos, to a language policy that has made French more important than native languages, this is not partnership, this is mental colonization, this is brainwashing. Ibrahim Traoré has dared to say what many leaders before him feared to say, that Africa has been taught to see itself through the eyes of its colonizers. He has broken the silence, declaring that the continent must no longer look outside for salvation, but must look within, to its people, its traditions, and its own strength. He has also spoken with clarity about the betrayal by African elites, those who have sold their people's futures for personal gain and foreign favor. He reminds us that real freedom will not come until African governments are accountable to their people, not to foreign embassies and financial institutions. What makes Traoré's voice different is that it doesn't stop at criticism. He is taking action, from expelling foreign troops to pushing for new alliances built on respect and mutual benefit. He is leading by example. He is inspiring others, from Mali to Niger and across the Sahel, to rethink what sovereignty truly means. This is not just about Burkina Faso. This is about an African awakening. Across the continent, especially among the youth, people are beginning to question the narratives they've been taught. They are demanding more than token independence. They want true liberation, economic, political, and psychological. Traoré represents a generation of leaders who are not waiting for handouts or permission. They are not impressed by European summits or G7 invitations. They are committed to breaking the cycle of dependency and to restoring pride in being African. His message is clear: Africa must rise for itself, by itself. The time has come to reclaim our resources, our minds, and our future. We cannot afford to let this moment pass. We must support leaders who speak truth, challenge power, and ignite real change. There are moments in history when the truth can no longer be hidden behind political correctness or buried beneath diplomatic language. These are moments when someone rises to speak on behalf of the silenced, to challenge the powerful, and to awaken the sleeping conscience of a people. Today, that person is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a man who has dared to speak the truth many have avoided for decades. Africa is not poor, Africa is not weak, but Africa has been made to feel, both by a system that benefits from its subjugation. Ibrahim Traoré has exposed the mechanisms of this system not only through economic exploitation or military manipulation, but through something even more dangerous: the manipulation of the African mind. He revealed France's brainwashing tactics. Traoré highlighted how France and other Western powers have used media, education, and culture to condition African societies into dependency, teaching people to admire foreign systems and mistrust their own heritage and capabilities. This is not a new strategy, but it is one that has become deeply embedded in the post-colonial era, through textbooks that glorify colonial civilization, through news outlets that paint resistance as rebellion, through entertainment that idolizes foreign lifestyles. Africans have been made to feel that progress lies in imitation, not innovation. Children in many former French colonies grow up speaking French before they master their native tongue. They learn the names of French poets and presidents, but know little of their own heroes, philosophers, or revolutionaries. African culture is often presented as backward, while European culture is packaged as modernity. This deliberate miseducation has cultivated generations that are mentally alienated from their own history and identity. Traoré's revelations shake the very foundation of the post-independence narrative. He forces us to ask hard questions. Why do so many African countries still depend on a colonial currency? Why are our school systems still modeled after our colonizers? Why do our leaders still seek approval from Western capitals before making decisions at home? The answer lies in this long and deliberate psychological conditioning, a quiet colonization of the mind. By revealing this truth, Traoré is not just making a political statement. He is waging a cultural revolution. He is calling on African youth to decolonize their thinking, to stop looking to Paris or Washington for validation, and to start rebuilding a sense of pride rooted in African realities, not foreign fantasies. But this brainwashing was never accidental. It served a clear purpose: to make Africa easier to control. A people who have been taught to question their own worth will never resist. A people who see foreign systems as superior will never demand change. France, along with other Western powers, has maintained its influence in Africa not by force alone, but by convincing Africans that they cannot succeed without it. Traore has broken that illusion. He has exposed the lie that Africa is incapable of governing itself, that Africa must always ask for help, and that Africa should always play the student in a global classroom it helped build but never leads. And now the people are waking up. From Burkina Faso to Mali, from Niger to the Congo, Traoré's words are being echoed in homes, classrooms, and on the streets. The youth are beginning to question what they've been taught, and more importantly, who taught it to them. This awakening is not chaos, it is clarity. It is a reclaiming of the African narrative. Traoré represents a break from the old guard, leaders who are more loyal to foreign interests than to their own people. His voice cuts through decades of lies and says, Africa must believe in itself again. We must teach our children the truth, honor our cultures, and demand a future that we define, not one written for us by those who once enslaved us. A new chapter is being written in Africa's long and painful history with the West, one that does not begin with colonization nor end with foreign aid, but with the awakening of the African people. That chapter is being led in part by a voice that refuses to be silenced, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. His leadership and his bold defiance of Western influence in Africa are shaking the foundations of Western influence in Africa. For too long, Africa has been entangled in a relationship with the West that is anything but equal. The promises of development, partnership, and peace have too often masked darker motives. What Traoré has done is strip away the mask and show the true face of neocolonialism in the 21st century. He has made it clear that Africa's so-called independence was never meant to be complete. It was carefully managed, monitored, and manipulated, often by the very powers that once held the continent in chains. He criticized the use of aid and peacekeeping as tools of control. Traoré emphasized that many foreign interventions in Africa are not acts of goodwill, but strategic moves to maintain influence, exploit resources, and prop up puppet regimes that serve foreign interests. Under the cover of humanitarian concern or counterterrorism, powerful nations have stationed troops, built military bases, and funded operations not to support the people, but to secure their own access to Africa's wealth. In Burkina Faso and beyond, foreign military presence has often been presented as a necessity to fight terrorism. Yet year after year, the violence continues, the insecurity deepens, and the real question emerges: if these missions were truly meant to stabilize, why does instability persist and even worsen? Traoré's response is sharp: because the mission was never stability, it was control. Foreign aid, too, is not always the gift it is portrayed to be. Traoré has brought to light how aid packages come with strings attached. Economic policies dictated by international lenders, political conditions imposed by foreign governments, and long-term debts that entrap nations in cycles of dependency. The recipient countries rarely get to shape the terms. Instead, they're pressured into accepting deals that favor donors and disadvantage local populations. The tragic irony is that many African nations are rich in natural resources, gold, oil, diamonds, uranium, yet they remain among the poorest. This is not coincidence, it is design. Foreign corporations and governments secure access to these resources through unfair contracts and compliant leadership, And when leaders do try to stand up and say no, they are often isolated, sanctioned, or even removed. Traore has refused to be one of those leaders. He is confronting the machinery of neocolonial power, politically, economically, and militarily. He has begun the process of reclaiming Burkina Faso's sovereignty by cutting ties that no longer serve the people. He is speaking not only for his own country, but for a continent long denied its rightful voice. What makes Traore's stance so significant is not just his rhetoric, but his insistence that Africa does not need to be saved, it needs to be respected. Africa does not need endless aid or foreign troops. It needs fair trade, technological investment, and the right to make its own choices without foreign interference. He believes that African problems should be solved by Africans, not dictated from conference rooms in Paris, London, or Washington. His message is resonating far and wide. Across the Sahel and beyond, citizens are rising, calling out the same injustices, asking the same questions, and demanding the same sovereignty. The youth especially are paying attention. They are no longer content to inherit a system built on exploitation and masked as cooperation. They are demanding something real. Across Africa, a new consciousness is rising, a wave of resistance not only against poverty and insecurity, but against the deeper roots of those problems: exploitation, foreign manipulation, and mental colonization. At the center of this awakening stands a young and defiant leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. With honesty, urgency, and courage, he is speaking the words that so many African leaders have been too afraid to say. He is challenging the legacy of colonialism that still lingers today in the policies, institutions, and foreign relationships that shape our continent. Africa has been politically free on paper for decades, yet in practice it remains bound by invisible chains. Economic dependency, military occupation, and psychological manipulation continue to define the relationship between many African nations and the West. Ibrahim Traoré has exposed this imbalance, calling out the forces that have shaped Africa's suffering. Not only the violent history of colonization, but the subtle and ongoing systems of neocolonial control. More than just a critic of foreign domination, Traoré is a visionary. He doesn't merely highlight the problems, he offers a path forward, one that places Africa at the center of its own story. He called for African unity and self-reliance. His message urges African countries to reject external domination and unite under shared values, cultures, and goals, building a future based on sovereignty rather than submission. Traoré recognizes that the future of Africa does not lie in further fragmentation or in competition between its own nations, but in solidarity. He believes that when African countries come together, sharing their resources, aligning their interests, and respecting each other's dignity, they become stronger than any foreign power seeking to divide or dominate them. This vision of unity is not just symbolic, it is deeply practical. In a world dominated by large economic blocs and global institutions, African nations divided are easy to manipulate. But united, Africa becomes a force that can negotiate trade, defend its resources, and develop its industries on its own terms. Traoré sees Pan-Africanism not as an outdated ideology, but as a necessity for survival and progress in the 21st century. He also emphasizes the importance of self-reliance, not just in terms of politics or economics, but in the minds and hearts of African people. For far too long, Africans have been taught to look outside for answers, to rely on foreign aid, to mimic foreign systems, to wait for foreign validation. Traoré calls this mentality exactly what it is, a product of brainwashing, deliberately cultivated through colonial education systems and perpetuated through modern media and diplomacy. In rejecting this dependency, Traoré is pushing for African solutions to African problems. He wants to see African schools teaching African history with pride. He wants to see local industries grow without foreign domination. He wants African soldiers defending African soil, not foreign troops serving foreign interests. And most importantly, he wants African people to believe in their own potential, not as victims, but as agents of their own destiny. His leadership has already inspired others across the continent. We see echoes of his message in Mali, in Niger, and beyond. Movements are growing, flags are changing, and people are beginning to speak the truth that was once whispered only in private. Africa must stand for itself. No one else will do it for us. Traore's vision is not rooted in hate or isolation. It is rooted in justice, dignity, and the belief that Africa deserves the same freedom and respect every other continent enjoys. He is not just demanding change from the West, he is demanding responsibility from African leaders and African citizens alike. Let us listen to this call, not with fear or hesitation, but with the determination to rebuild. Let us teach our children to dream with African eyes, to think with African minds, and to walk with African confidence. In the heart of West Africa, a voice has risen, not in submission, but in defiance. It is the voice of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, leader of Burkina Faso, whose message has reverberated across the continent and beyond. His words are not polished with diplomatic pleasantries, nor are they shaped by the expectations of foreign allies. Instead, they are forged in truth, urgency, and a commitment to restoring Africa's dignity. Africa has been independent in name for decades, yet its sovereignty remains incomplete. The hands that once held the whips and chains have shifted their grip to financial contracts, military bases, and psychological manipulation. Neocolonialism is not a relic of the past. It is alive in the currencies we use, in the aid we accept with conditions, and in the foreign troops stationed on African soil. Ibrahim Traoré has dared to say what others only think. He has exposed the structural lies, the false promises, and the calculated tactics used to keep Africa subservient. But what makes Traoré's message so powerful is not only his resistance to exploitation, it is his boldness in envisioning a different kind of African leadership. He represents a new generation of bold African leadership. Traoré is part of a rising wave of African leaders and thinkers who are unapologetically confronting colonial legacies and demanding respect, equality, and justice on the world stage. These leaders are not content with symbolic independence or empty gestures of recognition. They are fighting for a deeper kind of freedom, freedom of the mind, of the economy, and of governance. This generation is not afraid to speak directly about the failures of the past. They are naming the international institutions that profit from Africa's debt. They are rejecting military agreements that benefit foreign powers more than local populations. And they are reminding the world that Africa is not a charity case, it is a continent of vast wealth, talent, and strength. Ibrahim Traoré embodies this spirit, young, disciplined, and deeply aware of his people's suffering. He brings a clarity that has often been missing in African politics. He is not interested in appeasing the West or playing the polite client state. He is interested in sovereignty, justice, and the kind of leadership that answers only to the people. His stance has inspired hope among millions, especially the youth. Across the continent, young Africans are watching him and seeing something different from the leaders of the past. No empty speeches, no foreign scripted policies, no hollow promises. Instead, they see someone who looks like them, speaks their truth, and believes in their future. This new generation of leadership is also building new alliances. Leaders like Traoré are looking to their neighbors, not just to Europe or America. They are exploring regional unity, economic cooperation within Africa, and strategic partnerships that do not come with chains disguised as aid. They understand that Africa must be strong not only in isolation, but through collective strength. But with boldness comes risk. These leaders face pressure, sanctions, isolation, and even the threat of foreign-backed coups. Yet Traoré, like others walking this path, has remained firm. He understands that the price of freedom is often high, but the cost of submission is far greater. In him we see the kind of leadership Africa needs, unbought, unbowed, and unapologetic. Leadership that does not flinch in the face of colonial arrogance. Leadership that speaks to the soul of a people long denied their right to choose their own path. Africa is changing, and Ibrahim Traoré is one of the signs of that change. He reminds us that true leadership is not about power, but about service. It is not about pleasing outsiders, but empowering citizens. And it is not about fear, it is about courage. Across Africa, a storm of consciousness is rising, driven not by foreign agendas, but by the will of the people. In this awakening, one man has emerged not just as a leader, but as a symbol. Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso has become a powerful voice in the struggle for African self-determination. He has stepped into history not to maintain the old order, but to challenge it. He is not just managing a government. He is confronting centuries of exploitation and demanding a future shaped by Africans for Africans. For too long, Africa has been treated as a resource-rich continent without agency. From the ashes of colonialism came promises of independence, but those promises were swiftly replaced by new forms of control. Financial dependency, military intervention, and psychological manipulation. Many leaders looked the other way, complicit or powerless. But Traoré has refused to stay silent. He has called out the hypocrisy of foreign involvement, aid that undermines, peacekeeping that destabilizes, partnerships that exploit. He has broken ranks with the expectation that African leaders must be polite and compliant, nodding to Western powers while their countries are bled dry. In place of silence, he offers honesty. In place of compromise, he offers clarity. And in place of fear, he offers courage. His actions have inspired a broader awakening across the continent. By speaking truth to power, Traoré has energized populations in Burkina Faso and beyond, especially the youth, encouraging a rediscovery of identity, pride, and the courage to resist manipulation. No longer are young Africans content to be passive observers of their own story. They are asking questions, challenging narratives, and refusing to accept that their only path to success lies in imitation of the West. In schools, on social media, and in the streets, there is a growing hunger to reconnect with African heritage, to learn real history, to honor African languages, to build systems that reflect African realities instead of imported models. This is not just political change. This is a cultural revolution sparked by leadership that refuses to bow. Traoré's influence can already be seen beyond Burkina Faso. In Mali, Niger, Guinea, and other nations, similar calls for sovereignty and self-reliance are gaining ground. People are questioning why foreign troops remain on African soil while insecurity increases. They are demanding transparency from their governments and equity in international agreements. And above all, they are rejecting the idea that Africa must always ask permission to rise. What makes this awakening powerful is that it is grassroots. It is not orchestrated by elites or international organizations. It is driven by farmers, students, activists, and artists. People who are tired of waiting for change and are now determined to create it themselves. They look to leaders like Traoré not as saviors, but as proof that it is possible to lead with integrity, courage, and vision. He has reminded Africans that resistance is not rebellion, it is survival. That pride in one's culture is not nationalism, it is dignity. That refusing foreign domination is not radical, it is responsible. These truths resonate deeply because they were nearly lost to decades of indoctrination that taught Africans to doubt themselves and admire their oppressors. But the tide is turning. The old formulas are failing. The youth are not interested in recycled colonial logic. They want something different, something honest, something that is theirs. Traoré's courage has ignited that desire. He has proven that leadership can look different, speak differently, and act differently. And more importantly, he has shown that real power lies not in foreign endorsements, but in the hearts of a free people. Let this awakening spread. Let it rise with every voice that dares to speak, with every hand that dares to build, and with every step that moves away from fear and toward freedom. Africa is not asleep, it is awakening.